Well, welcome everybody. So today what we're going to talk about, and this might actually be applicable to you particularly, Taz, but from a different perspective, because we're going to talk about something that we have talked about in the past, but needs to be said and needs to be reinforced every now and then, because some of y'all are just weren't in that position before and are now. So, and this is good information that needs to get reinforced. Okay, so you are undoubtedly have if you've been in this business for more than 5 minutes, you know that it is difficult to win in a bidding war in this incredible seller's market that we have. Okay, so we're going to talk about some strategies, some things that you can employ when you are presenting an offer, some different tips and tricks that can make your offer more attractive to others, so that you can win more and close more deals. That is the whole goal and objective of everything that we do here and all the training that you're going to receive. Okay, so without any questions before we get rolling, and while I am switching screens, anybody? Okay. All right, is everybody looking at winning the bidding war on your screen? I love it. Okay, so let's talk about this. So all of the things that we're going to talk about today are strategies that can be employed, but I need to put a caveat on this. All right. Anything that you are doing comes with a certain amount of risk and a certain amount of strategy involved. And it needs to be done not in a vacuum, but with the full knowledge and understanding of your buyer clients. Okay. So you need to, if you're going to employ a strategy of using an escalation clause, you need to be able to talk to the pros and the cons of an escalation clause. If you're going to talk about, if you're going to employ a strategy using an appraisal gap coverage special step, you need to talk about the pros and the cons and what could happen with those. Okay, so all those you do with the full knowledge and understanding of the buyers. I'm also going to caveat this with, I would say, unless you can not avoid it, unless the listing agent is being uncommunicative, which happens, I would say you would never want to submit an offer with at least without talking to, or at least making an attempt to talk to, the listing agent. And one of the best strategies that I have found is, other than the obvious being the net to the seller, is there anything that the sellers are looking for that would help me to write a winning offer for you? Okay, to the listing agent. This is something that you say to the listing agent. And quite often, you will get everything that you need. They'll give you the keys to the kingdom, as I like to say. In some cases, they'll tell you they need post-closing possession. They'll tell you that they're very leery about X, Y, and Z, so avoid putting that into your contract. That they want a longer due diligence period because they've got time on their hands. You name it, it's possible to get it, and all you have to do is ask for it. It's the proverbial, if you don't ask, the answer is always going to be no. Okay. Any questions on that before we move forward? All right. So the caveats are, never do anything without the knowledge and the understanding of your clients about the risks of it, and always reach out to the listing agent before you go. Okay. So the best ways to win in a bidding war are the obvious: bid the highest, net to seller, submit the highest net. Okay. Sometimes that is the easiest. You can also do zero seller paid closing costs. Sorry, folks, I didn't realize these had the fly-ins on each bullet, because this is not the way I plan on presenting this, but we'll get through it. Okay, so the other thing you can do is offer a higher earnest money. The buyer who's willing to risk more is expressing a stronger amount of motivation towards getting the deal done. So the higher the earnest money, the more they're willing to lose, the more committed they are to the process. Okay. You could also do a short or no due diligence period. Again, I wouldn't do this just automatically because you don't know the seller. Without communicating to the listing agent, you may be looking at a seller that doesn't want a short due diligence, that they may want a longer period of time. They may want a closing date that's 3 months out because they're doing new construction. And if you haven't asked that question, you don't know. All right. We're going to talk about this in a little bit greater detail, but the due diligence period, if you want to do a short due diligence period, you can do the property sold with a right to request repairs instead of a due diligence period. And we'll talk about that in greater detail in a short while. And you can also include one of the things that I would suggest in there when you're doing a buyer's brokerage agreement for somebody in this market. I strongly encourage you to use the disclosures to buyers purchasing in a seller's market exhibit. Okay, that is available, and I'll show you here in a minute where to find it on Remine. When you have them sign a buyer's brokerage agreement, you could also have them sign this particular exhibit, which cautions them about some of the risks of the things that we're talking about employing here. Okay. It makes sure that they are fully aware of the strategies that you might employ. And it cautions them about it. All right. Other ways to make your offer more attractive to a seller. So continuing the theme of the shorter closing date, you can express flexibility on the closing date. Sometimes that's difficult to do within the offer. Say your client is like, I'll give them 3 months if they need it. So that you may not necessarily do in the offer, but you can definitely do in the email when you send the offer over. You know, say, we put this for 30 days, but the sellers could potentially do shorter. They could potentially do, or the buyers could do shorter. They could also do longer. Okay, because again, sometimes longer works better for the sellers. So don't automatically assume that shorter is automatically better. I've worked with sellers before where somebody presented a 14-day closing date, and they're like, oh my gosh, that could never be done in that time. I can never be out and ready. So you got to be aware of that. All right. In addition to due diligence period, you could also play around with a shorter amount of time for financing and appraisal contingencies. This is one that I would strongly recommend that you not do without lender coordination, without their approval, blessings, all of those things. So because anytime you reduce financing and appraisal contingencies, there is risk associated with that. And if your client gives up one of their rights with one of these two appraisals, they could potentially lose their earnest money, and they need to be doing so with the full knowledge and understanding of what those risks are. Everybody clear on that one? All right. I can't say this enough. The cleaner the offer, the better. Okay, so when I'm referring to clean, I'm referring to the amount and content of any special stipulations that you might write into the offer. Okay, so if your buyer is asking for repair of something in the purchase and sale agreement, then the seller is left to ask the question, well, if they're asking for a door to be repaired in the purchase and sale, then what's going to happen when they get the amendment to address concerns and they've got a 30-page long amendment inspection report and they want everything done? If you're willing to ask for more upfront in that initial offer, then you're probably going to be willing to ask more, and that might be a red flag to the buyer, to the seller. Okay, set your expectations with the buyer. There's a time to ask for things like a termite letter, including the washer and dryer. But in this strong seller's market, the purchase and sale agreement may not be the right time. It would be better to handle those things during the due diligence period and ask for those kind of repairs in the amendment. Okay. So in other words, don't ask for too much too quickly because it might be a red flag. All right. All right. So let's talk about other things that can make your offer more attractive to a seller. Who here is working with a buyer that is FHA or VA qualified, and they're finding it difficult to compete in this market. Anybody got any of those?
I am.
Yeah. And what is that? What is the primary reason, in your opinion, Heather Gale? You're muted. There you go.
I found that when we make offers, most of the time they want either conventional, because I've been asked, well, could they be approved conventional? So I believe is that FHA tend to require the seller to do certain things. And sellers don't want to do anything.
Yep. Okay, so let's look at these. When you are submitting an offer, I mean, and this is, we're going to go back to basics here. This is for every single offer. The order of preference for financing considerations when you're listing and selling a home. If you get a cash offer, that's always going to be, in most cases, it's going to be your best bet. Okay, assuming that the cash, that the number is right. But if you've got a cash offer versus a conventional offer, cash is almost always going to be king. Okay. And if that's the case, then you should also consider some of the cash option programs such as knock or ribbon to be able to take your FHA or maybe a VA offer and turn it into a cash backed offer. Okay. Next in the order of preference after cash is going to be conventional. Conventional loans are pretty much king in this seller's market that we're at right now, conventional and cash. FHA, and the answer to why, I think Heather Gale already touched on it, but basically the FHA loans and VA loans are going to be a little bit more onerous upon the seller, and there's something called that FHA amendatory clause and the VA amendatory clause, which basically renders the earnest money, surrendering of earnest money, a non-issue if it appraises low. That's the main reason why sellers are going to find FHA and VA a little bit more onerous and a little bit less desirable than a conventional or a cash loan. Okay, and there's the reason why. Like VA, there's an additional requirement for the seller to obtain the termite documentation. It's 100% appraisal. There's some seller paid fees and the VA amendatory clause, and those are all reasons why they're less favorable. All right, and then after that is going to be something like a USDA loan or any loan that has like a down payment assistance component to it, like Georgia Dream or NACA. I think I was working with somebody the other day that brought in a NACA financing and was asking about it. It's a great program. It's a great program for the people that those are designed for, to help them get into homes. But there's a bureaucratic component to that might delay the closing or add additional time to the closing. And that's why those are going to be less desirable. All right, so if you know these rules of engagement, and you happen to be in one of these categories of FHA and VA, then you might want to consider asking some questions to the lender about, is it possible for them to switch to conventional? Or is one of the programs, the cashback programs like Ribbon or Knock or Divvy or some of the others, are those potential options that might make your buyer's offer more attractive to the seller? Okay, so if you can't necessarily play in their game because of your client's qualifications, you just got to try harder, keep doing what you're doing, because price and terms are just two parts of the offer. You can favor other areas and still win. All right. Always review your financing contingency exhibit and the pre-approval letter carefully. Make sure you're good. The higher the down payment implies that the buyer is more financially secure and less risk to the seller. So in other words, if your client is only doing a 5% down payment versus a 20% down payment, if their other offer is a 20% down payment and yours is only a 5 and everything else is equal, that's what they're going to think about. Okay. And also, well-known local lenders are going to be preferred over some of the big online lenders or mega banks, or even an out-of-state lender is going to be given less credence than somebody local. Okay, so this is something I use this all the time when I'm talking to a buyer and they're bring to me their Rocket loans or Quicken Mortgage pre-qualification. That's when I will talk to them about, look, this is a strong seller's market and a lot of listing agents want to see the lender be a local entity as opposed to some call center in some foreign country, which happens with some of these mega banks sometimes. Okay, everybody with me on that one?
Send it to us, we can start drafting, and then you can always get that later. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, trying to get my slides to work again, y'all. Okay, and then another little sideline note, have the lender make a call to the seller's agent to explain the strength of your buyer's financing. I know that is something that Greg does all the time. He's done it for mine before, he'll do it for yours. If you're working with another lender, if they're not willing to make that call and do so in an expeditious manner, like, hey, I'm submitting this offer today, can you call them in an hour? Then you need to think about who you're sending your clients to for their loans, because a good lender will do that for you every single time. All right. Other ways to make your offer more attractive. Offer to utilize the seller's preferred closing attorney, even if it's not your preferred closing attorney. Don't get me wrong. I love me some Luter Larkin. They're going to take care of your clients. But is it one that if I'm in a highly competitive environment because I've called the listing agent and I know they've already got 6 other offers, am I going to fall on my sword over my lender, my closing attorney versus theirs? Not even close. Okay, it's not worth it. Don't try to force the seller into a quick decision with a short offer expiration date. This is a seller's market, and there are buyer's agents that think that just because they're saying I need you to respond within 6 hours, that you're compelled to do so. You can. There may be a valid reason why they need to know the answer to their offer in 6 hours, but the reality of it is because you are representing the seller, and if you are trying to represent your buyers and you're trying to create a short suspension to try to force them into a decision before they're ready to, it's likely to backfire on you. Does that make sense? Am I explaining that well enough, everybody? Okay. All right. Offer the seller some additional considerations. So, in addition to just terms of closing date and what have you, there are other terms that can add to the decision factors. And a big one is post-closing possession if they need it. A lot of sellers are in the position where they're ready to sell, but they don't have anything to go to, and they're trying to figure out where they're going to live. And if you provide them that solution, then the world will beat a path to your door. That's the metaphor I'm looking for. All right. Accuracy and attention to detail in the offer preparation and presentation are absolutely critical. You need to have a complete package, no missing or mislabeled exhibits, and include your current pre-approval letter, your proof of funds, whatever the case may be. The more thorough that your presentation of the offer is, the better off you're going to be. If the listing agent has to chase you down to look for your copy of the community association disclosure or the seller's property disclosure or the pre-approval letter, if they have to chase you down looking for the things that they need to be able to put your contract binding, then you have failed. Okay. Don't give them a reason to not do business with you. Okay. With you or your client or your seller. All right. And including in the pre-approval letter, a lot of agents will get wrapped around the axle and say, okay, well, if my house the house is listed for 250, I certainly don't want to show a pre-approval letter for the 300 that my clients are pre-approved for. And there used to be a time where you didn't want to necessarily show all of your cards. And that's what this kind of refers to. In my opinion, those days are gone. Okay, it's almost to your advantage to show the buyer that your buyer is qualified to purchase at a level higher than what their current offer price is. Okay, so it's not necessarily a bad thing when you're putting an offer in for 250 to show that the home that they are pre-approved up to 300. Okay. And then one additional way to make your offer more attractive, and this is again, there's some risks associated with this, and I wouldn't do this unless it was necessarily a newer home, is consider to offer the home with as is. In other words, we're not going to ask for repairs. Okay, that is extremely risky. We can still do the inspection. We can still know what we have going on at the house and if there are problem areas, but we're not going to necessarily ask the buyer or the seller to repair those items. Okay. And again, I probably wouldn't do this unless it was a home that was less than 5 years old.
But I'm just saying.
Just as a general rule of thumb.
Yeah, well, because I put it in that list.
Okay. So in other words, if you say as is, you're saying no seller repairs will be requested. Okay. Let's talk about some advanced techniques to make your offer more attractive to a seller. Is the use of an escalation clause. I helped somebody with one of these on Friday. Okay, and it just simply says, in the event of multiple offers, buyer agrees to increase the purchase price by more than X dollars. Usually that's about 1,000, sometimes 2. Over any other offer presented to the seller with comparable terms and conditions, so long as the other offer is an arm's length transaction and is presented to the buyer before the offer deadline. And in no event shall the buyer pay more than a cap of X. Okay. Listing agent agrees to send the buyer a completed offer of the buyer offer to the buyer's agent upon receipt of a comparable offer. Buyer agrees to execute an addendum to this offer reflecting the increased final price. Okay, so in other words, there's no way anybody could pull one over your eyes because they're going to require to present the competing offer to you. Okay, escalation clause is a great little tool. The biggest concern with an escalation clause is the home still must have that appraisal in it. So if you offered a cap of up to 350 right there, whoops, didn't mean to go back, but if you offered a cap of 350 right there and the home only appraised at 340, you still got a problem. You may have won the bidding war and you may have gotten the escalation clause, but now you've got a problem with an appraisal contingency. Okay. Some additional advanced techniques. If you do the 0 days of due diligence, you can also use the property sold with the right to request repairs exhibit. Okay, so what this does, everybody knows that a due diligence period is the period in time which you can cancel for any reason at all or for no reason at all. Okay, what this particular document does is it changes it from any reason at all and no reason at all. It just says that you can have that you can't terminate. There's only one reason you can terminate, and that's if you fail to come to an agreement on repairs that need to be done to the home. You can't just terminate and say, I've changed my mind. It takes the no particular reason out of the equation. Does that make sense? Strongly recommend that you take a look at this document and that you read this and you're familiar with it so that you know exactly what it says and the exact language of it. It's a little bit beyond the scope to cover every sentence in here. Okay. Some additional advanced techniques, and there it is, 2 different appraisal gap clauses that are available. These are all preloaded in special steps. There's one with an automatic price adjustment. So in other words, in the event the property does not appraise for at least the purchase price, buyer shall pay up to, I don't know, $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 in all cash over the appraised value at closing, not to exceed the original purchase price. In the event the all cash amount that the buyer agrees to pay plus the appraised value, the adjusted price, fall below the original purchase price, buyer and seller agree to sign an amendment changing the purchase price to the adjusted price. Does that make sense to everybody?
It does, Jay.
There's-
I have a,
No,
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I have a question. When, first off, you're getting a lot of feedback. Sorry.
Sorry.
But it's okay. But if you are going in, would it be better to put a higher, in your opinion, to put a higher, like not down payment, but earnest money? Or would it be better in this market to save the buyer's cash to do an appraisal gap clause? Does that question make sense?
It does, and it all depends on a number of other factors, the strength of the other merits of your offer as to which one makes the most sense. And it also is going to depend on what the listing agent is telling you, because the listing agent often is the one that's driving the bus on what they're looking for. So I hate it when somebody gives you an answer of it depends, but honestly, it does depend, and we can talk about that in a specific context. Okay, Lacey?
Okay. Yep.
Right. But the two of these basically do exactly the same thing. They tell you that that your buyer will cover some appraisal gap in there, but the two differences is the one at the beginning with the automatic price adjustment requires the seller to lower to whatever the appraised value is. Without a price adjustment, it leaves it optional for them to make that adjustment. They may, but they may also decline to do it. Okay, so I will tell you, I was helping an agent with this on Friday, and we used this one with the automatic price adjustment. And the listing agent came back and said, I like everything about your offer with the exception of that automatic price adjustment. Can you take that out? In which case we substituted this one for this one. So this one without the price adjustment went in place of the one with the automatic price adjustment. So I would always try the automatic price adjustment first, let them kick it back. Okay. Anybody have any questions about that? Does everybody understand why the automatic price adjustment is in your buyer client's best interest? Somebody said yes. Or if it is confusing, I can explain it again.
I think I get the concept, but not the wording, but you know me, so, yeah.
I tell you what, read over the wording of these, and then you and I have a session later this week, don't we, Tippy?
Yes.
We can talk about the details of it then. But if anybody else is confused about it, say the word now and I'll cover it again. Okay, so another advanced technique is offer some option money. This is, as described by a closing attorney friend of mine, it's a 100% legal bribe. And this is what it looks like. Everybody's very familiar with the earnest money section and the due diligence period where you put in the number of days, but everybody always skips over this option B, option payment for a due diligence period. This is where you can simply say, thank you for the honor of accepting our offer. In exchange for doing so, I am going to write you a check for $500 within 3 days that shall not be applied towards the purchase price. And it's just simply for the privilege of allowing us to bid on your home and to accept this due diligence period of 10 days. Okay, it's the closest thing you can get to a legal bribe, and it's money above and beyond at $500 or $1,000 that you just simply stroke a check to the buyer for the privilege of accepting your offer. Okay, so if you're a listing agent and you had two offers and they were both roughly equal, and this one had $500 in it for your client and the other one didn't, which would you choose? The answer is pretty obvious. Okay. Strongly consider adding any number of the seller's market special stipulations found in Remind Docs Plus under the Special Steps Library under Century 21 Connect Realty. This is where you find them in Docs Plus. And there's a whole whole slew of them, which I would love to have time to read each and every one of these, but I don't. But some of the ones that we just covered, seller's market escalation clause with cap is right there. Buyers are crazed to pay additional cash to seller at closing is right there. There's all kinds of good special steps that you can use in there. All right, and then some additional techniques, a personal appeal letter to the seller, or even better, a video that you shoot explaining why your clients love the home. This is a great example. This is one that goes way back to, gosh, all the way back in 2019, but it's one that a client did of mine to show who they were and why they love the house, and just gives you some good examples. All right, everybody. I went a little bit over and I apologize for that, but hopefully you got some good information. What questions do you have? Anything?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
All right, everybody. Thank you for your
Thanks, Jerry.
time today. Glad we had this time. And if you have any other questions, or if you want to cover anything in more detail, you know how to get on my calendar. Love y'all. Talk to you soon.
Thanks,
Okay.
Jerry. Bye.